Transgender mice. What are they? Where did they come from? And what do they want with our children? That and more on this week's episode of Footnotes. Hello and welcome to Footnotes, the stories that won't make the history books because they don't matter. My name is Emily Whitehead, I'm your host for this episode, and welcome to our second episode of Footnotes. It's called Footnotes. Before we start this week's episode, I first feel I need to address the allegations. Last week, at my first episode, it was about the Oscars. Alright, episode did come out after the Oscars had already happened. I recorded it before, we don't need to talk about that. But in it, I made some predictions as to who I thought would win our three main categories of Best Actress, Best Actor, and Best Picture. I was quite confident in my predictions, but they were all totally wrong. I did not get a single one right, as many people did mention to me, but that's okay. Let's just quickly run through them. So I said, for Best Picture, I said that I thought Conclave was going to win. It did not. Anora won. Anora was one of the ones I mentioned in my scandals, although I only gave it a fumble rating of 4 out of 10. So, as it turns out, the fact that they didn't have a intimacy coordinator and kind of were a bit weird about that didn't even matter. So, I guess it's fine. Best Actress, I said Demi Moore. It was actually Mikey Madison who won. That I'm fine. Look, I love Demi Moore, and I think this was like I think her performance was so good. I'm not mad at Mikey Madison. You know what I mean? I think she also did a fantastic job. She's also one of only two actors, her and Jennifer Lawrence, to have won Best Actress who won in the 90s. Everyone else was born before that. No 2000s babies yet. What the hell? We need to step up our game. But good for her. We love to see a girl winning. Best Actor. I thought Timothy Chalamet and Adrian Brody won. There were, I think, on the list, a number of other actors I would have been really happy to see win Best Actor. And Adrian Brody was not one of them. I thought there was no way. I thought there was no way, because part of the scandal was the use of AI in the film. Now, part of the film's use of AI was in the architectural drawings, which isn't really to do with Adrian Brody, but the other part was that they corrected his Hungarian with AI, which, in my opinion, not the most unethical thing, but it's like, you're going to win Best Actor, and you couldn't even do the language that most of your fucking 4-hour film was in. Whatever. There were the Best Actor nominees, I completely... Hello, Editing Emily here. So it is at this point that I absolutely refuse to stop rabbiting on, so I thought I'd skip that bit for you. His bloody speech went for... it was one of the longest Oscar speeches in recording history. Speaking of speeches going on for too long. Anyway, back to the podcast. Yeah, I get it. I was wrong. We know. Let's move on. On to the actual episode. So this week, I have 2 words for you. Transgender mice. For those of you who haven't seen it, President Donald Trump on the 4th of March made a comment on his hour and 40-minute State of the Union speech, and many noticed he made a curious comment. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Donald Trump? That's a name I never hear in the news these days. And I would say, yes, I know. That's why you come to Footnotes for the niche topics about niche people that never come to the news like President Donald Trump. But in saying that, the comment that he made, he was talking about the government misspending in the previous administration. He was shit-talking Biden. I know, it's very out of character for him. But in it, he's kind of listing through things he deems as government spending. There's stuff about, classic Trump stuff. He doesn't like immigrants and DEI stuff and all that other stuff. And then at the end, he kind of ends it with how he spent $8 million on making mice transgender. Let's roll the clip.
$8 million for making mice transgender. This is real.
This is real. But is it though? So, like many of you may be thinking, my first thought when I saw this was, can mice even be transgender? As far as I'm aware, and as far as I think most of modern science is aware, we don't know that mice, there's no evidence that mice even have a concept of gender. Of course, they have a concept of sex, but gender is a pretty complex sociological occurrence. I wasn't aware that mice even had a concept of gender, let alone the ability to be transgender, but good for them, I suppose. The next thought I had was, did anyone actually believe this? Now, this is going to be a shocker, but Trump supporters did believe it. Without any further really citation, apart from the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Yes, that is its real name. Yes, this is a real thing that Trump came up with, the most recent Trump administration. He has called his Department of Government Efficiency, he's named it Doge, presumably after the coin. I know there was also a Trump and Melania coin. Cryptocurrency is all the thing for presidents these days. But yeah, believe it or not, there is no direct citation in this speech. He just kind of lists off things like Department of Government Efficiency. They don't have a formal website where you can check what they're referring to. So people kind of just took it and went, yeah, of course this is real. The Biden administration did spend $8 million making mice transgender. Hi, editing Emily again. So this actually isn't true. I was misinformed on this one. Turns out there actually is an official website for the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. And this is very important because this is arguably more insane. So for starters, the thing I find weird is when you look up Department of Government Efficiency, it is not the first or second thing that comes up on Google, which it's the third, which is not, crazy, but it's a bit weird still for a government website. The first and second is like the Wikipedia page and the Twitter. But when you go to this website, I think I could be forgiven when researching for not thinking this was the real thing, because it is so insane. It is the dodgiest looking government website I have ever seen in my life. Like, I'm going to show a picture of it on the screen for those that are able to access the video. It is a dark web looking ass website, and it is literally just a embedded Twitter feed. It is just the Doge Twitter feed embedded into an ugly website. And I think the fact that the logo is a little coin really confirmed what I thought, that it is literally named after the coin. It was also it's headed by Elon Musk, so of course they named it intentionally after his stupid Bitcoin. It's majorly weird. And also, to be clear, when I say they didn't cite anything, that actually was basically still correct, because there is no search function, there's no categorization, there's not anything that you would expect from an actual official government department website. It's literally just an embedded Twitter feed. You kind of have to Control F if you want to find anything. I searched it and I couldn't find anything referencing transgender mice specifically. There's other anti-trans propaganda in there, but that's a whole other thing. But what I did do was then go directly onto their Twitter and then search on Twitter for transgender mice. And they do have a thing talking about that, but it's just kind of like listing of numbers. There's no actual citations. This was around the time of that speech that occurred. It was the 6th of March this was on. It's just saying there was this amount of money made for a grant for trans mice, but they don't cite the study. So it's not very official looking, really, in the end anyway. So, again, back to the podcast. This then got swept under the rug pretty quickly as just a thing that Trump said. I don't know if you hear a lot of Trump says a lot of things, is the thing. However, then, on the 6th of March, user Debunction Junction on TikTok posted this video explaining where they think Trump got this from. They said that Trump actually got the word transgender mixed up with the word transgenic. In this video, they cite an $8 million grant that was given to the University of Cincinnati on a study of transgenic mice and how it can be used to cure diseases. So the implication of this is basically Trump, or his administration, saw a study that was approved by the Biden administration for funding, got an $8 million grant on transgenic mice, and then thought that transgenic was the same thing as transgender, and then kind of were like, yeah, that's what the Biden administration did. They funded something for transgender mice. Now, for fairness, it is important to say that this video didn't have anything specifically backing it up. And although it is very funny, this statement was made in speculation while it was kind of presented as fact that this is what Trump had done. He got it mixed up. There is no direct evidence at this point that this is a mistake that Trump made, that Trump had think about this specific study. This person just kind of found an $8 million study on transgenic mice and went, this is probably what he did. So this statement was speculation, to be clear. There was no, at this time, specific evidence that this specific study in Cincinnati was the one that Trump was referring to, the specific study that got $8 million of funding. So it's not entirely true. However, as we'll see, very, very close, almost exactly on the mark, in fact. Although when I saw this, I did fully believe it because it, I fall for things on the internet too. We're all human. However, this video did absolutely blow the fuck up, leading many to believe that Trump had either misspoke or did not know the difference between transgender and transgenic. So, what is important to probably do now is explain to you what transgenic is, if you're not aware. So, if an organism is transgenic, it is an organism or cell whose genome has been altered by the introduction of one or more foreign DNA sequences from another species by artificial means. For example, a classic example, in biology textbooks around the world, we had these little images of glow-in-the-dark mice. What these mice did was they had foreign DNA from jellyfish that were bioluminescent, kind of stitched, I guess is a layman's way of saying it, into their DNA sequence by artificial means like science. Basically giving them the ability to be bioluminescent. This can be used for fun things like making glow-in-the-dark mice, or as it's most commonly used in studies today, is for testing human responses to diseases in mice. So they use human DNA sequences on mice, making them transgenic because they contain foreign DNA from humans. That then allows them to respond to diseases in the way that humans would, which allows them to use the mice to test for diseases for a whole bunch of different things. I'm hoping that makes sense. Next in the story. Trump did not like people saying that he was wrong. Trump doesn't often like to be told that he's wrong. And so just a few days after his speech, the White House publishes a official press release. The official White House website, whitehouse.gov. I'm emphasizing this is from the official White House website because what it reads is kind of insane. Official press release, once again, from Donald Trump from the White House on the White House government website. It reads, yes, Biden spent millions on transgender animal experiments. Last night, President Donald Trump highlighted many of the egregious examples of waste, fraud, and abuse funded by American taxpayers, including $8 million spent by the Biden administration for making mice transgender. Also, quick note, miss the days where politicians didn't just openly, slander each other as soon as the other got into power. That's probably besides the point in this, but moving on. Trump then writes, because this is crazy. He then says, the fake news losers at CNN immediately tried to fact check it, but President Trump was right. Then in brackets, as usual. This is the direct quote on an official press release from the President of the United States, calling the CNN fake news losers and going, he was right, as usual. I know at this point we're all a little bit desensitized to kind of slightly more than slightly, to the outlandish things that are said by Donald Trump. For God's sake, can you imagine a leader of any other world government saying something like this? I'm trying to imagine, I'm in Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese being the fake news losers at news.gov.au, or the fake news losers at The Guardian. Can you imagine? That would just be, I just think it's just so insane. And you would, it would be so inappropriate for anyone to do and yet here we are. He then, in this press release, lists a bunch of different scientific studies that had received government funding, that he claims were making mice transgender. Fact. Under the Biden administration, the National Institutes of Health doled out millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded grants for institutions across the country to perform transgender experiments on mice. He then lists a bunch of different scientific studies, citing them with links to descriptions of them, including quotes of a bunch of different scientific ventures, including like how much funding they received, and then kind of has the total at the bottom of $8,290,053 cold hard American dollars. So I guess this time Trump got him. Or not, because believe it or not, none of these studies that were cited are actually examples in any way of making mice transgender. What these studies were studies of the impacts of hormone therapy, specifically sex hormone therapy, so hormones like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, and how these impact a variety of different things on the human body, but they were testing them on mice, transgenic mice, if you believe it, because these mice, as previously explained, had human DNA kind of synced with their DNA, so that they reacted to these things in the same, so they reacted to this hormone therapy in the similar way to a human would. What kind of some of these examples were, so there was sex hormones and how they influence asthma. So it was basically studying like the impact of hormone therapy on mice and how that can be used to cure or I guess mitigate asthma. That was $3 of the $8 million there. There was also a $2.5 million one on the reproductive implications of hormone therapy. So that might impact various things in terms of reproduction and fertility. Now, many of these trials did focus quite heavily on trans individuals. So, for example, there was a $300,000 study on how hormone therapy can reduce breast cancer likelihood, as well as a $450,000 funding that was spent on hormone therapy affecting immune responses to the HIV vaccine. These included studies of how sex hormone therapy specifically impacts trans individuals. That is because trans individuals are some of the best case studies that we have at the moment of the impacts of long-term extensive sex hormone therapy, because a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them undergo HRT, which means that they are an excellent case study for how that impacts the human body. More to the point, hormone therapy in itself does not a transgender make. Currently today, we have already current uses of HRT and sex hormone therapy being used for reasons completely outside of gender-affirming care and being transgender. For example, it's currently used quite commonly to treat menopause symptoms. These studies, the ones that Trump cited, can be used to benefit the health of everyone, not just trans individuals. Not that trans individuals' health isn't a reason to fund it, but this is not something that is funding the queer community. This isn't even something that's funded specifically for the queer community. This is for a health study. These are for multiple health studies on things like Alzheimer's, HIV immune responses to vaccines, to asthma, to breast cancer. These are things that can benefit everyone. And more to the point, none of these studies are making mice transgender. Claiming that giving hormone therapy to a person automatically makes them transgender is like claiming that people who get a mastectomy to treat breast cancer are automatically transgender, because it's exactly the same as top surgery, right? You're cutting off your boobs. It's not. We know it's not. No one's claiming that people who get mastectomies are automatically transgender. It's just a similar looking from a distance procedure that are used for totally different things. There is no scientific evidence on any of these studies that would say anything about it making mice transgender. In case there was any confusion from these helpful little articles that Trump cited, he also very helpfully linked a nice file highlighting specific places that he deems evidence of transgender mice experiments. The sorts of things he goes around and highlights, if we get this document up, is we developed new models and shows that T limits wound healing in large animals with different effects in XX versus XY animals, and we propose to develop an animal model of feminizing hormone therapy, and basically various things referencing hormone therapy. He also, in this article, several times highlights just the phrase transgenic mouse models. So after all this, it might really be that he thinks that transgenic is the same as transgender. So, in the end, what does this all mean? Unfortunately, at this point, I have to give a serious story warning. I know, I'm sorry, this is not what you came here for. I know this is not what we come here for. We come for the unimportant stories, but it is directly related to this. I'm sorry, we've got to be serious for a moment. So, to be clear, while many of these projects were testing how hormone treatment are often used on trans individuals, this was not for the goal of making mice or making anyone or anything transgender, just to be clear. This practice is actually very, very common amongst endocrinological studies in over the whole world in a variety of fields. If the Trump administration legitimately believed that scientific research that involves sex hormone therapy is a waste, they'd have a ton more cutting to do. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of studies throughout, the last 20 years that use sex hormone therapy on mice. There would be so many more things they'd have to cut. There are studies of this in everything from menopause, as we previously stated, to osteoporosis, to male pattern baldness. So why did he pick these specific studies? This is the bit where it gets a little bit cooked. So these studies, the thing that made these studies different to all the others is that these studies specifically reference the existence of trans people, be it to, as part of their human trials, or reference that hormone therapy is something that is often used within trans individuals. What these studies did was they referenced the existence of trans people. And that's why they were kind of deemed transgender scientific experiments. It does kind of seem that this thing is just part of Trump's larger attack on trans individuals. If we go back to his first week in office of this new presidency, he made that executive order that the US only recognizes two genders, male and female, as if male and female are even genders, which they're not. They're sexes, not genders, but that's a whole other thing. He's obviously and very clearly trying to make an active attack on the trans community, trying to actively eradicate them from history by kind of signing these studies that in any way reference the existence of trans people as automatically false and automatically wasteful. It also, the fact that he keeps bringing up transgenic and referencing it as if it's transgender does kind of indicate this kind of speculation. There was a speculation kind of made in the Economist podcast recently that covered this similar topic, that he kind of seems to just be doing like a Control F, trans, enter, and then going bad, 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 no matter what trans the word in context is, even if it's transgenic. It seems like this is not a actual policy thing. This is not a care of actually looking at what is wasteful. It is just an open attack on trans individuals, and it is very bad, right? This, actively attacking the pure existence of these people is terrible. It's a really horrible thing, and the implication is that that he's trying to eradicate them from the existence of of modern day US literature. It's really bad, and it's giving 1933, and that is something that should be deeply troubling to all of us. Thankfully, on a slightly brighter note, to just kind of bring up in the air, it's not doom and gloom. We currently have 10 active lawsuits that have already been filed in just a little over a month of Trump's presidency that file against the Trump administration specifically on his anti-trans legislation. 4 of them have already resulted in temporary restraining orders against the enforcement of these executive orders. So 4 of them have already been temporarily unable to be used until the proceedings have been completed, and then hopefully they'll win the case. It's not all doom and gloom. There are lawsuits that are trying to defend the rights of trans people. It is not a lost cause, but it does require fighting. So unfortunately, kind of the end note is that this is not just a funny story about transgender mice. I kind of wish it was just about transgender mice. That would be kind of fun. But it's about the attempted eradication of the existence of trans people from the US, and probably eventually all queer people and anyone who's different. United States of America, land of the free, everyone. But with that, that is going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Footnotes. If you enjoyed, please give us a rating and follow us on whatever platform you're listening to this on. I know this week's episode was a bit shorter than last week's episode, so let me know whether you liked it this length a bit shorter, if you want me to whack back to the hour-long episodes. And also, in the comments, let me know, if you were a transgender mouse, what would your name be? I think my name would be Peter. My name's Emily. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Ta-ra!